Well, I'm not going to add much on the elections that isn't covered in the paper. I thought we had a very useful article by Mike McNair on the local and the metro elections. I haven't got the final figures, and when I look for them, I sort of come up with slightly different figures. Either way, the Labour Party, what was it, 474 gains as a throwaway. We can talk about 500, definitely a swing towards the Labour Party. Greens up 74 seats, and we all know about Bristol. They seem to be gaining, again, this is very superficial, I admit it, but they seem to be gaining at the expense of the Labour Party. So an awful lot of new Green votes seem to be coming from the left of the Labour Party. John Smithy is, I presume, one of them. I don't know that he got a vote in Fenland for the Greens. The Lib Dems, on the other hand, I think are gaining in the so-called blue wall of the South. This will be with, I know Brexit is a bit of an old issue now, but this will be with anti-Brexit former Tory voters. So the Tories are being hammered, yes, by the Liberal Democrats. They're also being hammered by the Labour Party. And the Labour Party, in terms of its spinmeisters, its psephologists, its teams of focus group aficionados, will be making a calculation that what they lose to the Greens, what they lose to the left, they more than make up in terms of from the right. That's Keir Starmer. So his strategy, and I think it is a strategy, is to triangulate towards the Tories, and that's with the recognition that there will be a price to pay for that. And the calculation will be that come a general election, an awful lot of people that voted Green in these elections will come back home, because what the choice is between the Tories and Labour when it comes to forming a government. And I suspect somehow that that's right. Okay, so we also have Blackpool South. Nothing surprising. You know, quite frankly, I could have written the script before the whole series of elections, and I'm hardly claiming originality or any profundity here. There was talk of the Tories, you know, still even after the polls closed, of Street hanging on in the Midlands, the mayoral contest. I mean, shruggy shoulders from me, but they lost. They hung on to one. They can't really claim that as a great victory. I have to say that weirdly, on what would it be, Friday, this is obviously after the polls had closed, excuse me, I was told in my household, everybody on social media is saying Sadiq Khan is going to lose. Me, everyone on social media then is stupid. I don't know how this rumor started. I don't know where it was from. I mean, my only guess is that in the run-up to the poll, Sadiq Khan was trying to avoid, you know, Labour people staying at home. And I remember reading my first article, and only article on this subject, in the Evening Standard several weeks ago, where it said Susan Hill, or whatever her damn name is catching up with Sadiq Khan. Open the paper or look at it on screen. Oh, she's 19% behind where she was a week before, 20% behind. Me, sod that. I'm not going to read rubbish like that anymore. Anyway, as it turned out, well, what a surprise. Sadiq Khan won. Basically, we saw, you know, the opinion polls confirmed. And what I want to do is just spend a few minutes discussing the more quirky results. And of course, what we're talking about when it comes to Quirky results are the left. And what we saw was four. I don't know what George Galloway had been boasting about. I'm sure he had been talking about taking this or that council, certainly Rochdale Council. Either way, they took 4 seats. What did they get? Something like 20,000 votes or thereabouts for all their candidates. The other noticeable thing here, of course, is the success of so-called independents. Now, I think in terms of total, there were 93 independents, self-declared independents elected. Now, that will range from anti-ULEZ campaigners against 20-mile-an-hour zones, traffic calming measures. It will go from those people right over to people that were standing on a pro-Palestine basis. And certainly when it comes to the north, when it comes to well-known constituencies, these weren't protests around traffic. This was the Palestine question, and it was definitely hostility to Keir Starmer and his stance on Palestine. Okay, in terms of Tusk, Trade Union and Socialist Coalition, they're saying that of their 470, that's the figure I've got noted down, 470 candidates, 46 of them got over 5%. Now, I'm not going to do the mathematics, but of course, what that really means is that on average, I mean, there are some very good results, I think, isn't it, in Plymouth or somewhere like that? They ran second. Either way, what it means on a national level is that they did very poorly. And, you know, they are down towards the bottom, you know, running alongside, quite frankly, loony candidates. Now, some on the left, you know, if you look around, especially the SWP and ex-SWP left, are making a great thing about not making a great thing about George Galloway and the Workers' Party. I think that that's a mistake. Of course, it's not that they got stunning results. This isn't a rerun of the Rochdale by-election or anything like it. Nonetheless, if we're talking about seats, they gain seats. Now, what we have certainly in Socialist Worker in the latest edition is a bigging down, or whatever the opposite of bigging is, a smalling down on George Galloway's results and a bigging up on the independent pro-Palestine results. As I said, I think that this is fundamentally mistaken. Why? Because Socialist Worker is making a great deal of George Galloway and his fellow candidates, their stance on trans rights, their stance on abortion, their stance on open borders, and other such questions. My guess, and it's only a guess, but I suspect somehow if I took the time, and I'm not going to take the time, and I looked around at the pro-Palestinian independents, many of them would have similar views to George Galloway and the Workers' Party. And the idea that what we're dealing with here is the independents, totally principled, George Galloway, totally opportunist to the point of being unsupportable, which is the position of the SWP and a lot of ex-SWP type organizations, is not the right method. What we need to be looking at is not, you know, elevating trans rights or women's rights to be the crucial question, because if we did that, I could apply my own particular criteria, and I'm going to make the key question open borders, which is a principled Marxist position. Marxists favour free movement. And then, of course, they always add, we're talking about genuine Marxists here, the necessity to organise workers, trade union rights, party rights, citizenship rights, not just a question of people going here, there, and everywhere and breaking strikes, organising people into the working class. But what's the position then of the trade union and socialist coalition? Are they in favour of open borders? Answer, no. What they're in favour of is non-racist immigration controls. What do non-racist immigration controls look like? I mean, I don't know. CPB, the Morning Stars Party, same thing. Non-racist immigration controls. This means immigration controls. That's actually what we're talking about. So it's an unprincipled position. And we could carry on. What's the Morning Star's position on China? Whatever you define China as, I don't define it as a worker state. I can define it as many other things. I think it's an incredibly complex society, but it exploits labor. It oppresses the working class. That I have no doubt about. The Morning Star, I do suspect, somehow is in receipt of finance and help from the Chinese Communist Party and its various how should I put it, arms or tentacles. And indeed, it's only just been recently that the General Secretary of the CPB has returned from call it a fact-finding trip to China. I called it a freebie to China, where he came back wagging his tail, saying everything's fine and everything's wonderful. Okay, so if I wanted to make China the key issue, I couldn't possibly vote for the CPB. This isn't the right method. What we need to do is engage with such organizations. And when it comes to a fight, all other things being equal, when you're faced with a Starmerite and a left-wing challenge, my own feeling is, and I think I'm talking on behalf of the CPGB here, we haven't exactly dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. Our general approach is to go for the left-wing candidate and certainly go for the most viable left-wing candidate, not on the basis that we prefer George Galloway to Spew compared with the CPB. I know that argument has been put. My own particular take would be, for example, when it comes to the next general election, I presume that George Galloway will be standing in Rochdale. I could be wrong, I don't know. But presuming that he is, I would urge people to vote for George Galloway. When it comes to Islington North, I think I'm right about the constituency. What we have is, well, what we might have is Jeremy Corbyn. I would say vote Jeremy Corbyn. And in Plymouth or wherever it happened to be, where Tusk got 15, 16, 17% in the local elections, presuming that they're standing a parliamentary candidate, I would call for a vote for Tusk. But yeah, critical. So I'd question the Tusk candidate on immigration controls. I'd question the Workers' Party candidate. I'd question the Workers' Party candidate on trans rights, women's rights, abortion rights. But I'd also, and this is what we've been doing, criticise the SWP, who today cannot touch George Galloway because of these issues. But in a previous existence, when they were in the same party as George Galloway, and I'm talking about Respect, when they were in Respect together with the British branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, not only did they vote for George Galloway, they voted down those principles of open borders, of a woman's right to choose an abortion. They even voted down republicanism, because if Respect was a Republican organization, it would put off royalists. Well, this is the depths of the SWP's opportunism. And you would have thought, at least when they're saying they can't possibly vote for George Galloway today because of his position, there might be some recognition of what they did in the past, and you would have thought maybe some self-criticism. So either way, this isn't the right approach. We should try to engage with other comrades on the left, but of course we should do so critically. And I have no problem myself saying that if it's a straight contest between the main bourgeois and petty bourgeois parties, i.e. the Labour Party, the Tory Party, the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, I would have no hesitation in voting Labour. Not because it's a principle to vote Labour, but I'd vote Labour simply because of its connection with the working class movement in terms of its history, in terms of its traditional base in the working class, and links with the trade union movement. You cannot say that about the Lib Dems. You cannot say that obviously about the Tories. Can't say it about the Greens. No, vote Labour. Of course, critically. You could even vote Labour, and maybe that's a position the CPGB will adopt, conditionally. What do you think about Palestinian rights? What do you think about Britain still supplying arms to Israel? And I presume, by the way, that the war in Gaza will continue throughout this year. It shows no sign of ending. Why? Because Netanyahu and his cabinet, not the war cabinet, but his cabinet, have every interest in carrying on this war almost on a permanent basis. But that one aside, I think our position is strategically coherent and it's tactically astute as compared with, and I know I'm just looking at the attendance today, a lot of you comrades were at the debate with the Olarites last week, the Spartacist League, and I cannot work out their position. Here they are basically saying clean split with opportunism. Okay, so if you're a sectarian, you cannot have anything to do with opportunism. You've got to, adopt your purity, otherwise you get tainted. And there they are in Tusk. I mean, I'm not worried about trade union rights for prison officers. I'm in favour of them, but they are apparently against them. What does Tusk say about NATO? What does Tusk say about the Palestine question? No, this is an opportunist lash up. And then when it comes to the Labour Party, I understand why myself in the debate and other comrades in that debate thought that they'd adopted some sort of third period a position of describing the Labour Party as a thoroughgoing bourgeois party. That's it, equivalent of the US Democrats, which is the position of Spew, remember, I think going back when? 2010 maybe? I'm not sure. But certainly they went, when Corbyn was elected leader, and went, that was a bit of a mistake, wasn't it? Either way, I think it's very understanding why myself and other comrades thought that that's what they were arguing. They weren't. Instead, they're arguing that Keir Starmer, you can't vote for Keir Starmer. And what they mean by Keir Starmer is the party that he leads. And so that includes left-wing Labour MPs, left-wing Labour MPs are at least able and feel compelled for their own particular reason to stand on pro-Palestinian, platforms. And I think that's to be welcomed. Okay, what they say is very circumspect, is very guarded and very opportunist, but nonetheless, we should be out to differentiate between these people. So whether we apply a critical support, well, that goes without saying, or whether we apply a conditional support, that's another question. But voting Labour isn't a matter of principle. And indeed, as I've argued, just looking back at history, worth noting that when it came to the Tsarist Duma and its system of Curia and its system of electing electors who elect your delegates to the actual Duma, the Bolsheviks were prepared to do deals. They were prepared to do deals with the Mensheviks, opportunists. They were prepared to do deals with the Socialist Revolutionaries, peasant party, crossing class lines. But they were also prepared to do deals with the Constitutional Democrats, a bourgeois party. Why? Because it strengthened the working class. And what we should be about when it comes to general elections, by-elections, local elections. Our criteria isn't that a Labour government or a Labour councillor is better than a Tory councillor or something like that. No, this is rubbish. It's about the strength of the working class. That's our criteria. So, for example, thinking back to my youth, I can tell you that the best government I've ever lived under was headed by a Tory. His name was Edward Heath. And we had 2 miners' strikes in his period as Prime Minister. We had a mass movement of defiance against his Industrial Relations Act. We had a huge surge of student protest, huge surge of women's protests, and crucially, the 1974 election, glorious moment. I remember sitting in the front room with my mum with the TV off because there was nothing on TV, in the dark because there was no electricity supply. And there you are, we had a general election. Teddy said, who rules the country, the trade unions or your elected government? And the electorate turned around and said, well, it ain't you, matey. Now, I wouldn't have voted Tory, but the crucial question was a militant, combative working class. So it's not about choosing the butcher, it's about strengthening the working class. So even though I think that the Tusk project is pathetic, you know, given the choice of a Labour candidate and a Tusk candidate, personally, and I think myself speaking on behalf of the CPGB, would have no hesitation. And I'd certainly vote for the comrades in Spartacus League, or the comrade, I should say, presuming that they get their act together and have a candidate. I would vote for the Spartacus candidate, as long as there wasn't a more realistic left-wing challenger. So, for example, if they sit in Rochdale alongside George Galloway and a Labour candidate, I'd say, sorry, comrade, I'll still vote George Galloway. And you can criticise me, I don't give a damn. This is about strengthening the working class, and that's my criteria. Okay, SWP. Looking at socialists, well, I look for the quote that I always know is going to be there. We've talked about their attitude towards Galloway. It doesn't make sense, given their past, given their attitude towards the so-called independents. And then I found what I was looking for. We must be careful that we don't allow elections to become the focus for the protest movement. And of course, what they mean by that is not what they mean is not they mean So you must be careful not to allow the protest movement around Palestine to find its expression in the ballot book. That's actually what they mean by that. And so what they keep banging on about is real politics, is out there on the streets, and their job is to build street protests and workers' strikes. Well, from our point of view, from the point of view of classic Marxism, we don't decry the streets, we don't decry strikes. I would say that strikes are, in terms of economic strikes, at the lowest level of the class struggle. I have no hesitation in saying that. But I would say that when it comes to a tweedledum election, okay, we are choosing between who will oppress us. But if there's a left-wing challenger, we ought to do our best to encourage that challenge and put it onto a proper footing, which must be done in conjunction, in our view, with the fight for a mass Communist Party founded on a principled maximum minimum program that aims to put the working class in power, not just in Britain, but also across Europe, in order to spread the revolution internationally into North America, into Asia, into Africa, into Latin America. So elections can be changed from a means of deception, a means of duping us, into a weapon on our behalf, showing our strength, getting our MPs, getting up there and using the platform provided by Parliament in order to denounce the bourgeoisie, in order to mobilize mass opposition, for example, today around the Palestine question, but also other questions. Okay, just a quick comment. Natalie Elphicke, you couldn't make it up, could you? Defects from the Tories to Labour, a great coup, of course, for Sir Keir Starmer just before Rishi and Prime Minister's question time. There's this woman sitting on the opposite benches, and you can see, films from Parliament of various government ministers going, jaws slightly dropping. Rishi, of course, couldn't reply effectively. He hadn't been coached. He had Dr. Dan, of course, from the previous week, but now we have Natalie this week. Of course, the Tory press, above all the Murdoch press, is now, it's knives out for Natalie. The reason she defected was she wasn't given a ministerial position. I don't know. I believe the stories. I'm not saying it's true, but I believe them. That when she got into Parliament, she lobbied on behalf of her now husband over sex charges, and was told in no uncertain terms that ministers, the Lord Chancellor, does not interfere, Natalie, with what judges do. That's against the law, even for ministers to do that. We can't do that. So I get the impression that Natalie, maybe I'm wrong, but I get the impression that she's a political green. I don't mean that by Green Party, but a political novice. I could be wrong. Either way, we know that Dr. Dan and Natalie aren't standing in the next general election. But what makes it amazing, isn't it? And a number of comrades on the left have quite rightly commented that what we have is Dr. Dan and Natalie Elphicke welcome with open arms, put on public display, boasted about, and boosting the Labour Party's opinion polls. So it's reported by 2% in the process. Meanwhile, Diane Abbott remains suspended from the Labour Party for saying, yes, a stupid thing. But quite frankly, if I went round the parliamentary Labour Party, I could find not only people saying stupid things, as Diane Abbott undoubtedly did, but offensive and deeply reactionary things, not least Sir Keir Starmer, when it comes to his question of how he's going to compete with Rishi Sunak when it comes to torturing migrants who are coming over the English Channel and ganging up with the bigot, Natalie Elphicke, who is a bigot. There's no doubt about it. And the idea that Labour Party spin doctors are putting out on her behalf that Rishi Sunak has deserted the centre ground is a nonsense. Everyone recognises she's on the right of the Tory party. Why she defected, I don't know. I don't know what role she'll play in the future. We're told that it's not about the House of Lords. Either way, the point I would make is that Labour Party looks like it's on to win whenever the next general election happens, and it's got favours to grant. It's got the ability to hand out all sorts of generous offers for past services rendered. So I'm sure that Natalie will get her reward, along with Dr. Dan and maybe others who are thinking of jumping ship. And it's, of course, why, apart from the Murdoch press, which surprises me somewhat at the moment, why you've got so many people meeting shadow ministers from the city. Just look at the Financial Times reporting. There's sort of continuous round of meetings between bankers, insurance companies, manufacturers, and the Labour Party front bench. They need to know these future ministers when it comes to business deals. Okay, just a shift to Rafa. we're now clearly in the opening stages of the offensive on Rafah. The population in the east has been told to get out. They've got out. The population in the center of the city has been told to get out, and they're getting out now. So reports are coming in of the center of Rafah looking like a ghost town. One presumes that this will be followed by the west of Rafah, and what we have is refugees from being refugees from being refugees from all over Gaza, let alone Rafah, now relocating themselves to the Mediterranean coast, where there's no infrastructure, there is no tents, there is no medical facilities, no clean water, no supplies of electricity, no supplies of food. And that's what Israel is doing. So how it all ends, heaven help me, I haven't got a clue. Maybe at some point Israel makes a break in the border, which they've now seized in terms of Rafah, the border between the Sinai, between Egypt and Gaza, and forces people through. I don't know. Either way, this is clearly ethnic cleansing. It's clearly a war crime. It's clearly collective punishment. And of course, we know in terms of the political economy of Israel, just like the political economy of white South Africa and white America, it's got a genocidal logic to it. You need to get rid of the native population. That's what happened in America. That's what happened in Australia. And that is the danger, the precise danger in Israel. Israel cannot tolerate a Palestinian population that comes anywhere near equal to the Israeli Jewish population. That simply cannot be allowed. So the Palestinians will have to go, or you'll have some sort of system of Bantustans, which is what effectively we've been living with already. Okay, meanwhile, we have the UN vote. I think that this is symbolic. Of course, we all know it. This isn't binding. It's the vote of the General Assembly, i.e. all countries who are members of the UN have a vote. What was the vote? 143 to let Palestine in as some sort of UN member, 25 abstentions, including the UK. That's not insignificant. I would say that that is tribute to the, is it 13 national demonstration and countless local demonstrations and countless university protests that there have been since October the 7th. How many votes against? Well, I haven't got the, it's 9 votes against, excuse me. That includes the United States, Argentina, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Israel, and then a whole series of countries, not being chauvinistic, I promise you, that I've vaguely heard of that exists somewhere between continent of Asia and the continent of America, called micro something or others, that presumably have been brought up by the United States or bribed by Israel, I don't know. Either way, it's also worth noting that France voted in favor of the resolution. That shows you the isolation of the United States. It shows you the isolation of Israel. And I have to say, the piece of theatre carried out in the UN debate by Gilad Erdan, the Israeli ambassador to the UN, where he got his mini shredder out and shredded the UN chart. To me, I don't know, I'm as you know, I'm not a frequent visitor to social media, but I just would have thought, to any critical press, that was a gift. Who's shredding the UN Charter? I know how the UN Charter was written, wasn't it? Eleanor Roosevelt. It was the wartime alliance between the Allied powers, crucially Britain, the British Empire, America, and the Soviet Union that drew up the UN Charter. And lots of lovely things. It will have lots of lovely things in it about self-determination, national rights, and all the rest of it. It's Israel that's not only symbolically shredding the UN Charter, it is actually doing it as we speak. It's shredding not only the UN Charter, it's shredding international law, international conventions, any sort of decency of one human being to another is being shredded as we speak in Gaza today. I just thought it was an own goal. And the fact that the bourgeois media in Britain reported it straight in a pro-Zionist sense, I just think says everything about the isolation of the BBC, Sky, the Murdoch press, the Telegraph. Look at the UN vote, 143 countries. And this isn't just because we got dictatorial regimes in Russia and China. This is also these governments reflecting mass opinion around the planet when it comes to the crimes of Israel. And to illustrate that, I will turn to a piece of TV that I haven't watched, and I didn't watch, and that's the Eurovision Song Contest. Now, you know, of course, that the Eurovision Song Contest is non-political, isn't it? Well, I was rooting for the Russian entry myself. I thought the Russian song was great. It reminded me in that sense of, what was that piece by Steve Reich, the minimalist composer? Was it 4 minutes and 30 seconds or was it 4 minutes and 20 seconds? Reminded me of that piece. Of course, it was 4 minutes and 20 seconds of silence. Why? Because Russia is banned from the Eurovision Song Contest. Why? Because it invaded a country and it annexed territory. Israel is a member, for various reasons, of the European Broadcasting Union. But of course, it's invaded country. It's called Jordan. It invaded a country called Egypt. It invaded a country called Syria. It's annexed territory in Syria, the Golan Heights. It's annexed territory on the West Bank. It's forcibly displaced, 1 million, 2 million people in Gaza. It's inflicted collective punishment on them. But of course, it's a non-political contest. Well, not according to a lot of the artists who were determined to perform with Palestinian flags, with watermelons as logos, wanted to interrupt their songs by stating their solidarity with Palestine. And I'm thinking in particular of the artists from Ireland, Switzerland, who were the winners. See, I keep up with things, and Greece. But also, and this really amazed me, I'd not heard it before. I was listening to a BBC reporter, and I think he smuggled it into his report. I don't know, I should have taken his name down. I think a good reporter. Anyway, he was reporting from Malmo, and he said, well, when the Israeli singer, let me get her name right, Eden Golan, if I get her name right, was singing, the audience, the live audience, basically, gave her a tough time, booing before she started, kept quiet when she was singing her song. Remember, the song had to be rewritten because it had the original version had reference to October the 7th. That wasn't political, remember. But when she went into Hebrew, big boos go up. When she'd finished, big boos. And the BBC reporter said the organisers are piping in applause. So we didn't get applause. You heard applause on the BBC. You would have heard applause on TV. This was artificial applause. This is the sort of applause you got at football games in the middle of COVID. And what is going on here? Look, unless I'm naive, look, this isn't political people going along to listen to Eurovision the Eurovision Song Contest. This, as far as I would know, these are people that are pop fans that would have got their tickets months and months and months and months ago. Certainly last year, certainly, surely before October the 7th. So this isn't the equivalent, at least as far as I know, of political people infiltrating their way in to the Eurovision Song Contest final. These are pop fans themselves. So it's not just on the outside that we had mass demonstrations. The BBC said hundreds. Look at the pictures of what hundreds of people look like. Thousands and tens of thousands of people demonstrating. But pop fans themselves were objecting, not because they hate the singer, but they hate what she represents. And what she's representing is genocide. What she represents is ethnic cleansing. What she represents is Western, and in particular, US hypocrisy. That's what the demonstrations have been about. That's what the booing has been about. So I was just amazed by the fact that the organizers had the chutzpah to pipe in artificial applause. Okay. Moving on, last item. Our beloved Tory government, there's proposals in front of it now to ban Just Say No to Oil, to ban Palestine action. Are these organizations responsible for violence? No. Are they terrorist organizations? Do they put anyone's life on the line? No, not as far as I know. No, if there's an ambulance there and someone wants to go to hospital, as far as I know, they would lift their go slow march or whatever it happens to be. These people are not out to inflict damage on anybody. What they're doing is protesting in the same way I can remember when it came not to musical events, but I can remember in my youth protesting outside the Twickenham rugby stadium. Meanwhile, in the ground itself, Peter Hain, now Lord Hain, launched himself out onto the pitch and was dragged off. But what I remember, unless I'm mistaken, I can remember the Tories, I can remember them saying that this is very disruptive and really isn't sporting behavior. And aren't you naive? This was the message, certainly from Thatcher and other Tories. Don't you know if you have one person, one vote in South Africa, that you'll let in the ANC, and they're just really communists, and this would strengthen the Soviet Union. And that's why we stand with South Africa. But what they didn't do is what Rishi Sunak and the Tories and the Republicans and the Democrats are doing in the United States, and that's branding people as anti-Semites. I never heard any Tory saying that you were anti-white. The idea is risible, as is the idea if you had any decent journalism in Britain or the United States that these protesters in Palestine Action or on the mass demonstrations or in the student encampments are anti-Jewish rubbish. If you look at the demonstrations, if you look at the camps, what you have quite rightly is on display Jews against genocide, the Jewish bloc. And we have, like in Oxford, I saw in the media, an Israeli MP go on to one of the Greens at one of the colleges in Oxford with a big Israeli flag, of course, big smile on her face. Was she in fear that she was going to be shot, assassinated, beaten over the head? Of course not, because it's a lie. And that's what they're coming out with. I'll just say this, that the ban on Just Say No to Oil and the ban, it's not enforced, by the way, this is a proposal, is perfectly logical of the Tory government and indeed of the bourgeois establishment. We've seen a whole series of Muslim organizations, or should I say Islamic organizations, banned. Loads of Irish organizations banned. Quite a few radical organizations from abroad banned, but also some right-wing neo-Nazi or Nazi organizations banned as well. And the problem I have is, for the left, is a bit like the old Pastor Niemöller poem, that when they come to come to us, there's no one left. Well, of course, it's not true, but the poem has a point, and that is stand up for the rights of all. Stand up for the rights of even people you disagree with. And we've done that. We stood up for National Action, far-right organization, not because of what it did, but because we're in favor of its freedom to actually articulate its views. That's what we stood up for. In the same way Leon Trotsky was prepared to go to the United States to testify to one of the houses of un-American activity, why he favored there being no ban on the Communist Party of the United States or the US Nazi Party. He was in favor of freedom of debate, freedom of speech. Why? Because once we let the bourgeoisie, once we let the state restrict that right, ultimately they will come for us, because their enemy isn't National Action or some marginal Islamic group. The real enemy is the working class and its natural leadership. The natural leadership of the working class is the left. I'm talking in the widest sense. So I was looking back. I didn't know the title, but I just thought worthwhile looking back. Only a few years, 2019, July 2019, and there was a publication produced called Violent Extremist Tactics. Ooh. And this was produced by some academics. Can't say I'm impressed, guys, by your academic prowess. Lots of graphs, lots of mathematical formulas, very impressive on that score. Politically, though, I'd rate you minus, if you can rate people minus. This was a study of the far left, and those on the far left that will be attracted to extremist tactics. And there was a certain Jack Conrad quoted from a CPGB aggregate in their study. And they quoted this Jack Conrad guy saying, look, comrades, be aware that there's a great danger that this witch hunt in the Labour Party will spread to wider society. It will go from attacking, the left of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, the likes of you and me, and what we'll have is this becoming something of where it's the bourgeoisie's main weapon to silence and demonize people. Well, we're not there yet, but damn it, we've got somewhere near it, haven't we? And of course, okay, today they're talking about banning Just Say No to Oil, Palestine Action. When next? Where next? CPGB, who openly advocate a workers' militia, a people's militia, the possibility of armed struggle. Counterfire, John Rees's Counterfire was quoted in this academic study. So is the Socialist Workers' Party. There's a logic here to ban, and they can either ban us on the basis of being terrorists, or they can ban us on the basis of being racist for using slogans such as, not my slogan, by the way, Palestine shall be free from the river to the sea. That's now being deemed as anti-racist. And how about this one? And I think I'll close with it. This Green councillor in Bristol, can't remember his name, I did write it down, but you'll know who I'm talking about. This Muslim councillor, one of the 34 successful Green candidates in Bristol. And at the end of, I don't know, I've watched it on video, but he shouts out, "We are not going to be silenced. We're going to carry on fighting. Allah Akbar." They investigate him. Investigate him for what? One presumes anti-Semitism, one presumes Islamic extremism, one presumes terrorism. It's equivalent of me. I'm a lifelong atheist, at least from the age of 4. right? But I was brought up in the Church of England. I come from a Christian culture. So I pepper my language spontaneously. And I presume I can just look at the guy and tell he's an Islamicist. So he is a practicing Islamicist. I'm not a practicing Christian. I've never been a practicing Christian unless I was forced to by my bloody teachers and the school and all the rest of it. Nonetheless, I will come out, moments of stress and say, thank God we won, or Jesus Christ. Now, I know that's very bad form if you're an ultra Protestant, because I'm swearing, I'm using the name of God or something like that in vain. I don't know. And I'm not accusing him by the way of blasphemy. I'm just saying that this is very deep in our souls. And we will come out with something deep in our souls, deep from culture. But that tells you something about Britain today, doesn't it? When a British person who shouts out Allah Akbar, God is great, because that's part of his sort of cultural thought world, is put under investigation. This shows you that something very worrying is going on in society, how deep the rot is, and how deep the potential of repression is in this society. I'm not expecting a massive clampdown. I'm expecting something much more incremental myself, but at some moments we have qualitative turning points, as we did with Sir Keir Starmer, and the suspension of Jeremy Corbyn, suspension of Diane Abbott. Of course, who led the way? Jeremy Corbyn, Jenny Formby, and the wider left that set up this no platforming, no toleration for racist views, no toleration for politically unacceptable views. In my view, we need open debate of things like trans question, women's question, abortion, open borders, Palestine, one state, two state region. We need open debate, and that will benefit the healthy left, and that's what we should fight for. Meanwhile, we should also fight for the right of speech of those we disagree with, because otherwise we've got no one to talk to, have we?